Brazil on the eve of the presidential election. We will also mention such issues as economic, cultural, political cooperation between Russia and Brazil, the BRICS format, and the number of other issues. Today, our speakers are as follows: Dmitry Razumovsky, director of the Institute of Latin America of the Russian Academy of Sciences, RIAC experts; Igor Gilov, special reporter of the Brazilian edition of Folha de São Paulo, famous Brazilian journalist, international columnist, and separately, a leading Russian expert on Brazil will make a brief comment on the situation. Let me introduce Lyudmila Okuneva, the head of the Department of History and Politics of Europe and America of the MGIMO University, and also the expert of RIAC. Now, let me say a few words about our format today. Our event is held in English, but Lyudmila Okuneva will speak Russian, and those who need the translation, they can find a special file fixed in the chat. This is the file with the key points of the presentation of Lyudmila Okuneva. I would also like to mention the speaking time for our speakers. This is 15 minutes for each speaker and about 5 minutes for the special commentary. After that, I invite everybody to take part in the discussion. Those who are willing to pose a question can raise their hand in Zoom or write their questions in the chat. So now I think we can start. Dmitry Vyacheslamovich, please, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Milan. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, colleagues from Brazil. Bom dia. Thank you for the organizing of this expert meeting on the upcoming elections in Brazil in the end of 2022. First of all, before I start, I would like to emphasize that I express the position of an academic institution which may not coincide with the official one, such sort of disclaimer. Today, as we know, we're passing a very difficult special period of the history when many previously elaborated narratives, theoretical constructions of reasoning or description of the regional cooperation, if not collapsing, but are definitely being revised. Since Russia is at the center of these events, this will inevitably affect the character of our relations with Latin American countries and with Brazil in particular. We can already see that the usual Latin American perception of Russia as an adherent of the basic principles of a multipolar world order, such as respect for sovereignty, yes, respect for international law, refusal of interfering in national affairs, all this has been called into question by Latin American side. And the coincidence in our strategic goal to build a multipolar world was the principal base, the core of our strategic cooperation with the region. Now this foundation, as we see, is eroding. What will form the new basis when the current crisis passes the hot phase and the contours of the new balance of forces will start to appear, then it will be possible to make some long-term forecasts and predictions regarding the strategy of interaction between the Russian Federation and Brazil. But right now, it's impossible to predict anything. But I would like to start with an analysis of relations between Russia and Brazil, how certain election results can affect their dynamics. For this, I would like to express a few general considerations. First, Brazil like 7 other Latin American countries, has the status of strategic partner of Russian Federation. Relations shifted to this strategic character after the famous Evgeny Primakov visit to Brazil in 1997, when there was signed an agreement of strategic cooperation. But the foundations of these strategic relations have changed. Under the presidency of Lula da Silva, countries work towards a common goal, the improvement of the world order. Latin America, under the leadership of Brazil, postulated itself as a pole and independent subject in the global arena, and Russia was a natural ally as a major power with similar goals. And of course, Russia was perceived by some of the Brazilian elites as a counterbalance to American dominance, to the United States dominance. We have never been able to compete with the United States in terms of trade or investments, no, of course not, but geopolitically, yes. Many experts in Russia and Brazil tended to simplify our relations, seeing it as a significant ideological component. They were perceived in the context of the left turn, which took place in Latin America in the beginning of the 2000s. And that is, they put them on a par with the relations of the Russian Federation with, for example, such countries as Venezuela or Nicaragua. So Brazil was compared with such sort of relations. Obviously, the cooperation of the two giants, northern and the tropical one, could not be so primitive and single-layered like with small countries. The ideological component always was secondary, especially since our countries do not coincide in many ideological issues and aspects. If anyone tried to present our relations as ideological ones, it was not on the Russian initiative. Despite our friendship with the left-wing countries, we have never relegated relations with the countries of a different political spectrum to the background, yes, avoiding one-sided and ambiguous ideological position, no. Therefore, as a result, Russia, for example, did not join the Alpha bloc, despite the invitations, nor did we begin to receive observer status in the Pacific Alliance bloc, despite all repeated invitations. I remember a wonderful phrase of one of the high representatives of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that in order to be friends with someone, it doesn't automatically mean that we need to join with him somewhere. The reassessment of the role of ideology has led to the wrong expectations of a number of experts that the departure of left-wing politicians in Brazil and the arrival of ultra-right President Jair Bolsonaro in 2019 will lead to an annulating of our relations, to the fall of our relations. This didn't take place, as we know, although a certain revision by the new elites of the new Brazilian elites, yes, of their foreign policy priorities led to an adjustment of our bilateral agenda. The ability to flexibly adapt, yes, to new demands and priorities of Brazilian elites is due to the fact that Russia's foreign policy, as you know, is based on 3 main principles: dialogization, pragmatism, and the reliance on national interest. It is written in our strategy of foreign relations. It was pragmatism and the ability to abstract from ideological differences that led to a very quick formation of a common language between the new government, by Jair Bolsonaro government, and Russian elites. Russia took into account the new priorities of Brazil and BRICS and adjusted its agenda in the association and the organization. Moreover, a new unifying principle was quickly found. Yes, the commitment of new leaders, of both leaders, to conservative family values. And this was declared very clearly during the recent Bolsonaro's visit to Moscow. Russia was able to respond to changes in Brazil's economic priorities. Under the presidency of Lula da Silva, the countries increased trade. There were joint investment projects both in Russia and in Brazilian territory. But this is not only due to the Lula da Silva. It is also due to the economic growth in both countries, which was observed in that period. Two dynamic economies can always find points of coincidence or convergence, yes, their economic interests. During Bolsonaro's presidency, countries are, as we know, unfortunately, in the systemic crisis. It is not just the effect of the pandemic, but we have common problems. Yeah, the task of increasing factory productivity and modernizing the economy. Bolsonaro launched a series of reforms to solve this problem, primarily in terms of liberalizing the access of the foreign capital, as well as foreign trade openness. First of all, about trade openness. There is a reason for hope for Russian side here. I am referring to Mercosur's significant reduction of external common tariff. For the first time, this idea was proposed in 2019 in the next summit of the bloc in Santa Fe in Argentina. And in many respects, it was an attempt to respond to the risk of the collapse of the customs union format in Mercosur. If some member countries wanted to conclude bilateral trade agreements with third countries, then you either return to the free trade agreement format of Mercosur as the Andean community of nations did before, or solve the problem by simplifying, reducing external tariff in order to reduce trade diversion effects for membering countries. The debate is very, very heated. In March of 2021, at a virtual anniversary summit of Mercosur, there was an open discussion, battle, yes, between Alberto Fernandez and President of Uruguay, Luis Lacalle Pou, who called the bloc in its current form as a ballast. I'm sorry. And already in April of 2021, Argentina was pressed to begin this process of reduction of common external tariffs on certain commodity items. Just recently, already in the summer of 2001, the former Brazilian president and one of the candidates now, Lula da Silva and Fernando Henrique Cardoso also, they published the famous open letter where they supported the Argentina position in its unwillingness to follow the path of unilateral liberalization of Mercosur trade. So if Lula da Silva returns to power in the end of 2021, we can see the next step of the reformation of the customs union format in Mercosur. Although this process of common external tariff reduction is painful for Mercosur itself, if such a unilateral trade liberalization of the bloc takes place, it could be very, very beneficial for Russian exporters. The prospects for concluding the free trade agreement between Mercosur and the Eurasian Economic Union today are obviously not very high, but if tariffs are reduced unconditionally, yes, unilaterally, then there will be less need for such an agreement and will be a new opportunities for Russian companies. But even if tariff reduction, even if tariffs are reduced, traditional commodity trade will start run into some natural limits. Yes, efforts should be made to improve some mutual information of investment opportunities or market niches, so on and so on, but still two such large economies have the infrastructure for such mutual monitoring of possibilities. So I would like to talk about some new areas of cooperation for which of all the above obstacles are not a problem now. First of all, I would talk about the actively ongoing digitalization process in Brazil. Russia is one of the countries, along with China and the United States, that possesses the entire set of its own sovereign technologies of critical digital infrastructure. Brazil has been experienced some explosive growth in a number of IT sectors over the past few years, driven by regulatory liberalization and the presence of a kind of, how to say, phase lag, yes, which is leading to very fast catch-up growth. I'm talking primarily about the fintech and the e-commerce sectors in Brazil. Rapid growth of the Brazilian internet market in recent years determines the underdevelopment of many types of internet services compared, for example, to developed countries and even to Russia. Brazilian fintech experienced rocket rising growth after, in November 2019, Brazil's central bank set out a draft rules for open banking that gave the financial startups opportunities. The foreign capital may reach now up to 100% for the enterprise capitalization. The growth rate of the sector in the country is the highest in Latin America, reaching 80 or even 100% per year. The reason of this growth is that a significant part of the country's population, primarily from rural areas, and these are tens of millions of people, have gained access to banking services that were previously not available for them. This, by the way, is an undoubted achievement of Bolsonaro, who, unlike Lula da Silva, was able to overcome the strong banking lobby and liberalize the financial sector. Major players such as, for example, New Bank are already emerging in the markets, but the market is still maturing and there is a huge room for growth. Russia has vast experience and competitive solutions in this area. For example, Russian Tinkoff Bank is one of the largest internet banks and one of the first in the world. We also have some technologies in our state banks like Sberbank and VTB, which also have some technologies to offer. An interesting trend that have been developing in Russia for a long time, but only now is emerging in Brazil, is the integration of fintech and e-commerce, when online trading platforms become part of the banking ecosystem. In addition to fintech and e-commerce, there are a number of areas where Russia could be a very, very interesting partner. Many of them are identified in the new Brazilian strategy document, the Estratégia Brasileira de Transformação Digital, the Brazilian strategy of the digital transformation, adopted in 2018. This is an online education, for example. Yes, the world leaders mainly are in China and the United States, but Russia have something to offer. For remote areas of Brazil, this is a super relevant problem and super relevant solution. Also, this includes the development of digital public services, and Russia is one of the world leaders in this sector, as well as the digitalization of many elements of some living space. Yes, for example, smart city systems, and so on and so on. Russia has competitive technologies and is only now beginning to think to expand them to the Latin American, to the Brazilian market. So far, Russian internet companies have a non-systemic sporadic interest right now in the dynamic Brazilian sector. There is a large flow of Russian program specialists to Brazil. Probably today, it is difficult to talk about the expansion of some large financial players in Russia to Brazil, since they are under sanctions right now. But for a large number of medium and small companies, opportunities remain open. Russian companies need to be ready to form some joint ventures, to establish partnerships with the Brazilian local companies to transfer technologies. Then they will always be a desirable partners. I think that if Russia managed to put out the fire of the, current crisis, then relations with Brazil are not particularly under the threat. I am an optimist in this, from this point of view. With Bolsonaro, there are clear priorities and directions that need to be developed. Yes, despite the negative assessments of the Brazilian elites of the current events, the Brazilians are very pragmatic, and this will not be an obstacle to mutually beneficial trade and technological alliances. I would even dare to say that in the face of the threat of isolation from the West, the importance of Brazilian market and Brazil, with its policy of neutrality, can grow significantly. And very soon, we can expect an increase in the interest of Russian companies in the country. If Lula da Silva comes along, returns to power, the positive baggage of our relations in the previous years can help us to overcome the current disagreements concerning the Ukrainian crisis. We will be able to return to common work on global goals. In terms of the economy, everything will remain the same. Yes, since Russia doesn't participate in the privatization programs that can be revised by the new government. So we mainly participate as the suppliers, as the technological partners, and as exporters. So with this, I would like to finish my presentation, and I will be grateful if you have some questions. Thank you.
Dmitry Vyacheslamovich, thank you very much for such a detailed analysis. I should say that I share your optimistic view, and I believe that despite all the current situation and the further elections, the outcome of which we still don't know yet, I firmly believe that relations between Russia and Brazil will remain constructive. They will remain based on mutual respect and interests, and they will be really pragmatic. Thank you very much. Now I would like to pass the floor to Igor Gilov, one of the leading Brazilian journalists, international columnists, and special reporter of the Brazilian edition of Folha de São Paulo. Igor, please.
Добрый день, дамы и господа. I'm sorry my Russian doesn't go much farther than this. And I think these are really, really stressful and challenging times to talk about relationship between countries, especially because Brazil has got a very particular stance towards Russia since the end of the Cold War. I think this is something important that we should look a little bit in the past, over the past, in order to try to understand or to forecast the future. Back in the day when the Soviet Union was over, of course, Brazil was just leaving a military dictatorship, which was completely against the communism because it was a left-wing and a right-wing dictatorship ruled by the military. And there was a firm stance against, as to say, the Soviet sphere by then. But when the Cold War was over, there was an opportunity to Brazil not to fall automatically into the American hegemony sphere that was being pushed forward by Washington, all the Washington consensus issues of neoliberalism and everything. And at the same time that we maintain our good relations with America, because it's kind of natural because of our political and geopolitical location, Brazil always sustained a very, very close relationship to Moscow since then. So all the presidents, either they were left-wingers or centrists or now a right-winger like Bolsonaro, they try to maintain good and established relations with Russia. This, of course, never translated into big breakthroughs in economics and in trade agreements or so forth. It's a very slow process because there were two different mindsets of doing business and talking politics. We must admit that. But always there's been a very good will from the two parts. The two parties were always looking after how can we improve the relationship. Lula da Silva, which had this very important government in terms of political advancement and social advancement in Brazil, was specifically, as our colleague here put very clearly, has put many of his political punch in the BRICS bloc. Because for him, it was a very good political asset to show either to the world or to internal politics and domestic politics. And he was sure to say to the world, okay, we are not depending on the United States to do our businesses. It's not that we are going to reject the United States or Europe. It's not just that we want to make business with everything and everybody. So he tried to put some weight on the Mercosur agreements, as our colleague put clearly and very precisely. There was all these issues around the common tariffs, which I have to say that now they're pretty much stalled. Mercosur is, as some minister put one day to me, it's in a sort of a coma these days because there's no political confidence between Bolsonaro and his colleagues, and all the group, the countries that comprise the group are looking forward to bilateral agreements rather to establish a coherent and unified position. This is something that it's still under development and may or not may change if, then this is the subject that concerns us here, or for my part, Lula da Silva wins the elections, which is kind of very probable to almost certain at this point of the dispute, which is, I should point, I have 30 years of political journalism here in Brazil and outside Brazil. And what can I say is that for all the predictions and all the pollsters that say that, okay, Lula is going to win the election, Brazilian elections, they tend to have many U-turns in the midway. So if you take Bolsonaro wasn't even considered a front runner, even though he was well placed on the polls in the beginning of 2018, and he ended up elected. So it's really difficult to make a 100% prediction on the outcome of the elections. But coming back to in time, so Brazil has this good relation with Russia, mainly because for both of them, it was a good deal in terms of political balance. Both are, of course, Russia is a much more important actor in the world stage than Brazil, but in their regions, they have similar or they have really very important issues that the other countries look at them in order to figure out the way of conducting foreign policy. So I have to say that the Brazilians look to Russia as a good partner because they didn't have anything to do with the issues that might or might not affect Russia. So when they have the issue of Georgia, Brazil didn't have to have a firm stance on it because it was so far from its political interests at that time. So the relationship could continue going on and growing, and commerce could go on and grow. Having said that, the current political situation is very tricky because although it's not the subject that we might address here, it became an issue of the political world in Brazil, as I guess all of countries are discussing the situation in Ukraine now. So it's clear that the visit that Bolsonaro paid to Vladimir Putin 2 weeks ago, it's been used here as a political weapon by his adversaries that are condemning the actions of Russia, and put Bolsonaro in a very defensive position because we have a diplomatic stance, and Brazil reinforced this when he voted against Russia in the Security Council of the United Nations, but making it clear that at the same time that it condemned military action, it condemned unilateral sanctions against Russia, which is a very important point to note, because it stands with the Brazilian tradition of neutrality. For years, Brazil has been a neutral actor in the world sector, because in the world field of foreign policy, because in this specific case, Brazil is a pacifist country, so it would say against war, but it will say against sanctions, because we all have this perception from being subject of American policies that were hurtful to the country over the decades and even almost centuries now. We are very wary of the idea of sanctions being used as weapons as well. So this is important to note that Brazil, even though it's condemning the situation in Ukraine, is condemning the sanctions. But to Bolsonaro, it was pretty tricky, because when he went to Moscow, and I was there following the visit, he stated clearly that he was there to pay solidarity to Russia. And this was read as support to the Russian policy to Ukraine, even though he didn't say that. And this is really interesting to see what's going to take place now, because all of his rivals in the presidential content here, they're using this already to say, see, Bolsonaro it's a warmonger or something like that, which is basically not important, or either it's actually irrelevant what Bolsonaro is towards Russia in this moment. Brazil is not an important country in this equation, but it became an internal issue that may or may not affect the relationships between countries after elections. I'll say why. The most vocal critics of Russia among the candidates are the candidates that are not very well positioned on the polls. So they don't have much thing to lose. So they can go to the Twitter and say that, oh, Russia is doing this or that. They're not going to win the election. So this is the point. The two candidates that are poised to be on the second round in October, which are Bolsonaro and Lula, they have, well, these different approaches. Bolsonaro made his point by saying, okay, we made a condemnation in the United Nations, but I still stand that Mr. Putin is someone who's looking forward to have peace and so forth with Ukraine. And Lula da Silva made some condemnations against the military action, for instance, but he went too far on condemning Russia or saying that we should break our relationship with Russia, because both of them know that in the future, as Mr. Razumovsky correctly put, in the future, Brazilians are much like the Russians, very pragmatic. So the issues are going to fan out at some point, hopefully, and business can be done again. And even though I guess we never seen a situation so extreme in terms of world reaction and this all this culture of canceling country that is taking place now against Russia. So we don't know how it's going to play out to the Brazilian public. We don't have polls indicating that this at this point, so I can't provide you with a precise vision on this. But I guess certainly we will have, there's plenty of room to establish the relationship again, and because it was actually not broken. The point is, where are the real fields of contact in which both countries can profit? This is something that has been tricky over the years. Yes, IT is very important, and Russia has lots to provide to Brazil. But there's this extreme prejudice against the idea, and this is mostly because of Western propaganda that's widely spread in Brazil. There's plenty of prejudice against the IT sector in Russia and Brazil, so it's gonna be tricky to sell through this channel. We have mostly over the years this commodities exchange. We get all the basic components for fertilizers from Russia, from Belarus, and it's the most important import that Brazil buys from Russia. And we sell raw materials, food, soya beans, beef, this kind of thing to Russia. And I think definitely there's room to improvement on this, because Brazil has got some fields in which it is very advanced, like in aeronautics with the Embraer firm, which by now it's of course impossible to go forth because of the sanctions, because the airplane is maybe 900% American, 900% American. So it's something that we have to see how it's going to develop. But I guess that in the future, these hurdles of these days they tend to be manageable. It's my point. So I think as a journalist and not an academic, I'll be more useful answering to questions. And thank you so much for your time.
Igor, thank you very much for this comment. I think there would be maybe some questions in the discussion, and we can continue your thoughts and your discussion. Now I would like to pass the floor to Lyudmila Okuneva, head of the Department of History and Politics of Europe and America of the GIMO University, who would like to comment more about the pre-election situation in Brazil now. So Lyudmila Semyonovna, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, dear friends, dear colleagues. I would like, first of all, I would like to thank our moderator, Milan, and I would like to thank very much our speakers, Dmitry Razumovsky and Igor Gilov, for their points of view, for their analysis on the Brazil-Russia bilateral relations. And I'll make a very brief comment on the election campaign in Brazil, although its official start will take place 3 months before the October elections, but now this election campaign is in full swing in the country. And I'll speak Russian as was confirmed. Друзья, коллеги, я хочу сказать, что начиная уже с прошлого года, с 2021 года, в Бразилии полным ходом идет предвыборная кампания, хотя ее официальное начало состоится только за 3 месяца до начала выборов. Выборы намечены на 2 октября текущего года. И нынешний президент, действующий президент Жаир Болсонару претендует на переизбрание, однако он отнюдь не является фаворитом. Со всей очевидностью основная схватка, так сказать, электоральная схватка намечается между ним и бывшим президентом Бразилии, левоцентристским политиком Луисом Инасио Лулой да Силвой, который, проведя за 2 мандата своего президентства, а эти 2 мандата имели место с 2003 по 2010 годы, вот проведя масштабные социальные реформы, эти реформы изменили социальный имидж Бразилии, он по праву заслужил определение самого популярного президента в истории Бразилии. Сейчас, в данный момент, Лула бьет рекорды популярности, значительно обходя нынешнего главу государства. Лула ведет активную работу по созданию широкого фронта, так сказать, который был бы направлен, который бы объединил в себе все силы, политические силы, которые выступают против нынешнего курса, нынешнего президента. Причем этот широкий фронт должен быть создан, по мысли Лулы, с участием не только левых, но и умеренных политиков, центристских политиков, и даже правоцентристских сил. И он, как очень умелый и очень опытный политический модератор, и эта черта, это его имманентная черта как политического лидера, он очень многое делает в этом направлении, встречается с некоторыми бывшими бразильскими президентами, с руководителями крупнейших партий, центристских, правоцентристских. В общем, действительно старается создать вот такой вот широкий фронт таких антиболсонаровских сил, если можно так выразиться. И этой же цели служит и выбор в качестве будущего вице-президента очень крупного политика Жералдо Алкмина. Это бывший губернатор штата Сан-Паулу, это бывший соперник Лулы на выборах 2006 года, и это одновременно один из основателей и патриархов партии бразильской социал-демократии ПСДБ, Жералдо Алкмин. Вот его, так сказать, выбор его в качестве вице-президента, он тоже служит этой цели. При том, что когда-то на выборах 2006 года они были очень такими острыми и глубокими соперниками, у них были совершенно различные программы, они действительно боролись, так сказать, друг с другом. Тем не менее, Лула заявил, что это все в прошлом, а сейчас во имя будущего Бразилии необходимо объединение вот таких вот сил. И это, наверное, с точки зрения расстановки сил, это, наверное, правильный выбор Лулы. Ну, а падению рейтингов действующего президента, конечно, способствовал целый ряд факторов, который имел место вот за 3 прошедших года его мандата. Это и противостояние с законодательной и судебной ветвями власти, это и, в общем, неприемлемое для гражданского общества Бразилии восхваление или симпатии к военному режиму, который 21 год, так сказать, правил в Бразилии. И, конечно, здесь сыграла роль вот такая негативистская, такая антипрививочная, если можно так сказать, позиция президента в период пандемии, когда Бразилия продемонстрировала очень печальный антирекорд, если можно так выразиться, когда более 600 тысяч бразильцев умерли в результате пандемии. Но здесь главное дело в том, что президент, он способствовал, так сказать, как-то уменьшению вот этих негативных эффектов пандемии, а он не носил маску, не соблюдал дистанцию, призывал не соблюдать какие-то социальные нормы, социальные меры. Когда появились вакцины, он тоже как-то выступил против вакцинации. Вот это все сыграло, безусловно, роль в том, что общественное мнение и многие общественные и политические силы, они, так сказать, стали отходить от его поддержки. И самые последние опросы, они сейчас свидетельствуют о некотором, правда, небольшом росте рейтинга Болсонару. Все равно разрыв между ним и Лулой все равно остается значительным. Но новым моментом является некоторое известное ослабление традиционной базы его поддержки. Прежде всего в лице лидеров ряда евангелистских церквей, а евангелисты это была, может быть, самая главная такая идеологическая опора и поддержка Болсонару на выборах 2018 года. Вот, и, значит, вот среди них намечаются, так сказать, какие-то колебания и отход некоторые, не будем преувеличивать это, но просто как тенденцию отметим. И также намечаются колебания среди военных, которые, нельзя сказать, что они являются электоратом Лулы, они и Лулу, в общем, не поддерживают, но и не столь однозначно, я бы сказала, как в 2018 году поддерживают Болсонару, потому что тоже видят какие-то изъяны, так сказать, его политики и не могут полностью поддержать его платформу. Не столь однозначно, как ранее, и поддержка агробизнеса. Агробизнес был тоже надеждой и опорой Болсонару. И, кстати сказать, во время визита в Москву, когда было решено увеличить экспорт бразильской говядины в Россию и также увеличить, чтобы Бразилия увеличила импорт из России удобрений, в которых остро нуждается ее сельское хозяйство, остро нуждается агробизнес. Вот это тоже, конечно, должно было сыграть по мысли президента на, так сказать, сыграть в предвыборных его целях с тем, чтобы укрепить и расширить поддержку агробизнеса, которая, как я говорю сейчас, она имеется, она есть, но тоже не столь однозначно. И вот агробизнес все больше и больше склоняется к кандидату третьего пути. Вообще поиск третьего пути, terceira via, это очень значимая черта нынешней предвыборной кампании. Речь идет о том, что бразильский политический класс стремится найти центристского кандидата, который мог бы преодолеть как бы крайности, как они говорят, поляризацию между двумя кандидатами, между левым кандидатом и праворадикальным кандидатом. Вот крайности вот этого левого и праворадикального направлений, чтобы такой человек, такой политический лидер, такой политик бы нашелся. И претенденты такие имеются. Кстати сказать, одним из таких претендентов является Серджио Моро. Это федеральный судья, который в свое время отправил Лулу за решетку, но действия федерального судьи нынешнего, сейчас действия бывшего федерального судьи Серджио Моро были признаны Верховным судом предвзятыми и политически мотивированными, ведь с Лулы были сняты сейчас все обвинения в тех преступлениях, прегрешениях, которые ему вменяли. И это дало ему путь, так сказать, к легитимизации себя как политика и к участию в предвыборной кампании, чего бы он не мог сделать, если бы с него эти обвинения не были сняты. Вот. Но у него, вот у Серджио Моро, как и у других претендентов, которых есть там немало, и они претендуют, что они будут олицетворять этот третий путь, у них нет ни малейшего шанса, в общем-то, пройти во второй тур и тем более победить. Их рейтинги, ну, очень и очень низкие, так сказать. Вот. Ну и, в общем-то, это, наверное, показывает то, что мы видим и в других латиноамериканских странах, такую какую-то общую тенденцию, что в обществе расколотом, в обществе радикализированном умеренный кандидат вряд ли имеет шансы на победу. И целый ряд выборов президентских, которые вот на наших глазах сейчас состоялись, они, в общем, в других странах Латинской Америки, они об этом свидетельствуют. И последнее я заключаю. Вот мы сегодня говорим о наших двусторонних отношениях. Мне кажется, и я бы хотела, чтобы Россия работала, вот кто бы ни победил, с любым из победивших кандидатов. Любым из победивших кандидатов. Мы сейчас не можем сделать точного прогноза, Потому что бразильская политика иногда бывает очень неожиданной, очень непредсказуемой. У нее бывают очень разные повороты, разные зигзаги. И вот на сегодняшний день мы можем констатировать какие-то вещи, но я бы не... Хотя, если бы, как говорится, выборы, как говорят социологи, были в следующее воскресенье, то да, конечно, здесь фаворитом, абсолютным фаворитом является Лула. Но все-таки я предлагаю, чтобы мы дожили все до 2 октября и уже, так сказать, сопровождали бы реальное соотношение сил и реальную кампанию. Но кто бы ни победил, мне кажется, что национальным интересам России, безусловно, соответствует сотрудничество с Бразилией, которое имеет большие традиции, и очень хорошие традиции, и очень большие наработанные уже вещи. Это сотрудничество имеет очень большой потенциал, очень большие резервы, которые пока еще совсем не до конца использованы. И оно, конечно же, взаимовыгодно. И оно отвечает национальным интересам и России, и Бразилии, безусловно. Что же касается каких-то позиций, по которым мы имеем разные точки зрения, это, в общем, тоже нормально в современном мире. Такие крупные, такие самодостаточные и, безусловно, суверенные страны, как Россия и Бразилия, имеют свои интересы и преследуют свои интересы. И эти точки зрения очень часто могут не совпадать. Но мне кажется, что вот необходимо отбросить то, что нас разделяет, не сосредотачиваться на этом, а сосредоточиться на тех пунктах, где мы совпадаем или где мы близки, и строить наши двусторонние отношения, безусловно, на основе прагматизма. И тогда эти отношения будут вне каких-то моментов кризисных, конъюнктурных колебаний. Сейчас современный мир очень сложен, и мы сейчас переживаем сложнейший кризисный момент. Но мне кажется, что вот межгосударственные отношения, их надо вывести из этого, так сказать, круга и строить их, безусловно, на основе прагматизма и на основе совпадающих позиций. А у нас в Бразилии очень много совпадающих позиций, и это дает какую-то уверенность и какую-то надежду на оптимистический все-таки характер развития этих отношений. Спасибо большое, благодарю за внимание.
Людмила Семеновна, thank you very much for your comment. Now I think we can pass to the discussion questions, and I already see a hand of Peter Yakovlev. Please, Peter Pavlovich, please, you can add something or pose a question. You are welcome. Could you... Могли бы включить, пожалуйста, микрофон? We have...
Do you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes, thanks. Because you prohibited to use microphone. Understand?
Okay, I see, I
It
see.
was not my fault. Well, dear colleagues, I could name my short remarks from Russia with business, Russian IT startups in the Brazilian market. As a matter of fact, I would like to say a few words more about the economic trends. As it said, business before pleasure. In my opinion, in modern situation, despite all the geopolitical issues, the prospects of Russian-Brazilian relations largely depend on the activity and cooperation of technological companies, including IT startups. In this aspect, I'd like to develop some remarks of Dmitry and Igor. There are some examples of such iterations. I would like to present a few cases, some of which were surprising for me personally. More precisely, these were pleasant surprises. The first case. 2012, Lingua Leo, a Russian educational platform of online learning of foreign languages, English, German, Chinese, Spanish, or French, entered the Brazilian market. Lingua Leo was able to make quickly its business in Brazil, even without large investments. After studying the local market, the company relied on social networks and achieved great success. According to the latest data, more than 800,000 Brazilians are registered on Lingua Leo. Up to now, this online service is the most recognizable IT product from Russia and Brazil. The second case, the Russian web application named Planner 5D. It allows to design on a computer or smartphone the layout of a department or private house or office. The Planner 5D service was created in 2010, and 3 years later, it entered the Brazilian market. They began to generate in Brazil about 10% of global traffic of the service. And unlike Russians, Brazilians were more interested in developing design plans not for apartments, but for country houses. It means that Planner 5D was able to win over the audience of wealthy clients. And this before the service was translated into Portuguese. Now Planner 5D web applications are available in Portuguese and occupy strong positions on the Brazilian market. The third case, Russian payment service Kiwi Wallets. Today, Kiwi has a network of more than 1,700 service points in 11 states of Brazil, including Rio de Janeiro, São Paulo, and Rio Grande do Sul. With the help of a Kiwi wallet, Brazilians can pay for about 100 different services. Since 2016, another fintech startup of Russian origin has been presented on the Brazilian market. It is MoneyMan service of ID Finance company. It provides microloans to Brazilians in a fully automated online mode. Just imagine, without leaving home, citizens who have passed machine scoring can get a loan at a relatively favorable interest rate. To deal with Brazilians, MoneyMan joined forces with the local bank, Sessional Financeira, that helps them to consolidate their positions on the market. What do these examples want to say? I think they indicate that Russian-Brazilian business cooperation is entering the digital period of its development. And this is very important for the future of our relations. It's the way to resolve our common economic problems mentioned by Dmitry. Thank you very much.
Can I, excuse me, can I add one example? Yes, thank you. My name is Vera Zabotkina. I'm acting vice rector for international cooperation of Russian State University for the Humanities, RGGU. And I'd like to say that it's not only digital world that will unite us, but it's digital humanities world. And of course, we cannot forget about cooperation in the field of education and research. And science diplomacy is one of those possible ways of future cooperation with Brazil. Very briefly, we had a proposal from 3 Brazilian universities to organize consortium, and actually on the 9th of December we had an online meeting with the representatives of the vice rectors and rectors of those universities. It's University of Londrina, Bahia, and Federal University of ABC. And what we are planning to do is to open the center at our university, a Russian-Brazilian cultural center, because Brazilian universities would like to to expand Brazilian, national Brazilian culture, classical Brazilian culture. And we are supporting this initiative. We also cooperate with the consortium of 24 UNESCO chairs in language policies for multilingualism. And the coordinator of this network is University of Santa Catarina in Brazil. And we are very actively involved in that kind of work. So at the moment, we are in the process of signing or negotiating agreement, because it's for the first time that there will be 3 universities from Brazil and only 1 university from Russia. What we propose is to extend the consortium from Russian side, and there should be other universities also participating in this consortium. More than that, during that meeting, there was an idea. Later, the ambassador of Brazil addressed the mayor of Moscow. There was an idea to celebrate 200th anniversary of independence of Brazil by arranging, a traditional Brazilian carnival in Moscow. I don't know what was the answer of the mayor of Moscow, but I doubt that at the moment when we are suffering from pandemics, it's feasible. But at least the feelings were so warm, and we felt this warmth even during the online meeting. The last point, they say that online meeting, there is no contact device. And that means not all brain areas are activated. But during that meeting, we felt that not only brain areas, but all the emotional centers were activated. And it's very important. And I think that the future of our relationship with Brazil lies along these lines. I mean, definitely humanities should unite us. And we offer our base for this future cooperation in the field of education. Thank you. And thank you, of course, Dmitry, thank you, Igor, and thank you, Ludmila. Wonderful talks, and really the level of expertise is very high. And I hope that with your help, we'll promote very good relationships. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. I would like now to address once again our speakers, if they would like to add something or to respond to one of these comments or something like that. Igor, Dmitry Vyacheslavovic, Lyudmila Semyonovna, do you have something to add?
Actually, it's just an add-on to what's been discussed, which is, I forgot to mention because it was not exactly part of my pitch, but one of the fields that we're starting to develop in a very interesting way in the recent months was in the pharmaceutical field. There's a big pharmaceutical company called União Química, which is now producing the basic input for Sputnik V vaccines in Brazil. Although Brazil doesn't recognize and didn't approve the Sputnik, it's not used here, they were able to get the permission to make the product here and export back either to Russia or to Argentina, which uses in the region. It's the biggest user of Sputnik. So it's one of the fields which involves high tech as well that are there's very promise on that. And during the Bolsonaro visit, the people from delegation from União Química, they were advancing talks on bringing some of their, because they're very big players on the the veterinary for big animals, like for cattle and so forth, vaccines, and they are really dealing on and thinking on opening a plant in Russia, which would be a major step in this cooperation.
Thank you, Igor. I also see a hand of Polina Chuprianova, RIAC referent. So, Polina, please have a question or would like to add something.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your presentations and comments. I don't want to interrupt the positive itinerary, but I want to ask the question for the speakers. So, as we know, as it was said today, Brazil, and specifically the president of Brazil,
there is something with the sound. I don't hear you.
We cannot hear you.
I'm sorry, but I think that our participants can't hear Polina's question, unfortunately. And as our time has already run out, I think we can finish here. I see also the hands of Dmitry Vячеславович Разумовский and Людмила Окунева. So if you can add a brief comment if you are willing.
Only to thank all the participants, all the speakers. It was wonderful. It was excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you for taking part in our event. We were glad to see you, and I hope we will continue these discussions on Brazil and the region of Latin America in general, as I believe that this region is really a perspective for our bilateral relations and further cooperation. And thank you very much once again for this fruitful and useful discussion.
Thank you, РСМД. Thank you, RIAC. Thank you for your initiative. Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Спасибо большое.
Dear colleagues, yes, from Russia.
Mhm. Mhm.